Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to sort of catch up and gather some of the strands that we have touched upon in previous webinars this year. There are among us this evening people who have not participated, at least live, in any of the previous Behind the Headlines webinars. So I welcome you. Before we begin, before I share my screen and begin to show you some slides, I just want to tell you that tonight is not actually precisely what I build it as. It is not simply an overview. As a matter of fact, this evening, I hope to show you some things that no one has ever seen before, news from today, which I added into my slide presentation straight from the field. The field coordinator sent me pictures. I put them into my slide presentation. There's big news today, which I hope to share with you. What I'd like to do this evening is not only to take a step back and to see how many of the very small incremental steps that were taken this year have added up to major changes on the ground. And by way of these things, to try to illustrate how it is that Regavim works, what we do. And although sometimes I'm asked, so what have you done lately? And so what's the difference? One little bit here and one little bit there. We want to see, some big changes. And what we do is very, very nuanced. And what we do is very, very meticulous. And we're in it for the long haul. So some of the things we're going to look at tonight are actually the result of a full 18 years of work. What we work at is the policy level. We work at creating policy change, either from the top down or from the bottom up, but always as an attempt to influence policy. So let's have a look at that together. I'm going to begin to share my slides. Maybe. Yes, I am. Okay. And I hope that you are seeing my slides. Yes? Okay, good. So this evening, we will take an end of year overview, but at the same time, try to get some interesting insights into really, literally today's news. Again, the subtitle being how an accumulation of incremental achievements adds up to new reality on the ground. So because I'm so excited to show you the the progress, I'm going to try maybe to advance. Got it. Yes. So before we dive into it, and for those of you who are new, and for those of you who would appreciate kind of an overview of what we do, how we do it, it really comes down to Zionism. For us, Zionism isn't a bad word, as it is in so many places in the world today. Zionism is what we do. It is the vision that has created the state of Israel, and we believe that the Zionist vision should be the main policy anchor and the roadmap for everything that goes on in the state of Israel, particularly as it pertains to land use issues, land use being the most basic expression of a nation's sovereignty. So what we do is we approach all things that arise literally from the ground up. We try to influence national policy having to do with land resources. And the way that we do that is unusual. What we do is we work from the very small level all the way to the very big level. And very often what I'm asked by people who are considering supporting the movement or becoming involved is, so how do you gauge progress? You've been chugging away for 18 years, 19 years nearly now. On Tu B'Shvat, it will be 19 years. What have you got to show for it? Some organizations plant trees. You put down $50, you plant a couple of trees. You see the trees are there. It's something you can touch. It's something you can feel. Other organizations will provide materials for families or for soldiers or for hungry children. All of those are worthy causes, but they have something that they can gauge in terms of their goals and in terms of their success. So I decided this evening to begin by saying that we do have metrics for success. The most important things to us, and what you see on your screen here, are the most important things here. They're ways that we gauge whether we're making progress, but they're not necessarily in that order. They're not in order of importance. They're not in order of focus, but they all feed into one another. So we measure our progress when we see change on the ground. That can be either enforcement of the law. Sometimes that's demolitions. Sometimes that is restoring property rights to rightful owners. Sometimes that is preventing illegal use of land or land resources. And other times, what arises from that is deterrence, where we see shifts in actual trends. But those things are generally the result of our work, and that's how we gauge whether our work is effective. We also gauge whether or not we have managed to bring about policy and legislative reform. Very often, when we analyze a problem, when we see something happening on the ground, we try to understand how that problem arose and how to fix it. But we don't fix it ourselves. We try to empower, encourage, and recommend to the government of Israel how to fix the problem, how to address it. And that means that we work very closely with members of Knesset from all parties who are willing to speak to us, and try to promote legislative and policy reforms. So when something actually is passed, when a law is passed, or when a policy directive is issued, we gauge our success by seeing how much impact we have had in that way. Another thing is that we sometimes force the government to take steps it doesn't want to, or highlight problems in legislation or in policy by going to court, by suing the government itself or its various branches. And sometimes we'll gauge our success by seeing that we have won cases in court. Another way we gauge our success is through public awareness. You all this evening at the other end of this camera are part of that, in that we bring our cause, our issues, our solutions, and our successes, and sometimes our failures, to the public. And that creates public support for the government of Israel and for the governments that impact Israeli policy, be it the United States or European governments. All of those public awareness campaigns create an atmosphere that helps us to bring about the changes that we believe are necessary. So this evening, some of the things I'm going to show you will relate to any of these metrics of success that we have discussed, so that you can keep these metrics in mind to see some of the things I'm going to show you this evening, and decide for yourselves how successful this year has been. I remind you that this year, as you all are well aware, we had some very, very severe challenges on the national level and the international level because of the events in the Middle East and in Israel in particular, because of the ongoing war, because of massive shortages of staff on our team. Almost all of the men have been on active reserve duty almost the entire war in stages. Some of them have done over 360 days of active combat duty thus far. And so we have managed to, the metrics of success that we will see this evening are, I think, luckily, not the result of this week's operations or this year's activity alone, but also because we have been doing this long-term for almost 19 years, and we are beginning to see the fruits now. So despite the challenges, we are beginning to actually see some of these measurable successes. So here's tonight's agenda. 6 different items that I'd like to try to run through if I don't run out of time. One is hot off the press, today's news straight from the Judean desert, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The second is the larger picture into which today's news fits, and that is the war of attrition that has been waged by the Palestinian Authority, on which we have been reporting and against which we have been acting for 19 years. And we have seen a massive change in trends this past year. They are about to be published, and you will get a sneak peek this evening. The third thing is our work in the Negev, which has this year taken a tremendous leap forward. And we are happy to report that the state of Israel has begun to govern in the Negev for the first time in our history. And we are extremely encouraged by that. The fourth is an issue that we have been dealing with since our founding, but has come to a head because of the events of the Swords of Iron War, and that is the role of UNRWA in the conflict, the role of UNRWA in creating and sustaining the conflict, and this past year and a half or so, the role of UNRWA in actual acts of terrorism. So we will talk about our progress there. The fifth is I wanted to just update you on, despite all of the challenges of this past year, about several new Regavim projects or divisions that are very, very important and are already having an impact on the ground. And finally, just to leave you with a taste of some of the forthcoming reports and policy papers that you can expect to see in the coming weeks and months. So here we go, diving straight in to subject number 1. Today, big news from the Judean desert. In the past, we have reported on massive Palestinian Authority violation of international law as per the Y Plantation Agreement. That is the third installment of the Oslo Accords, signed in the late 1990s. In that agreement, the state of Israel ceded territory in the Judean desert to balance out property holdings between the Palestinian Authority and Israel under the Oslo framework. And 3% of the territory that Israel handed over, changing it from Area C to Areas A or B, were designated as a no construction nature reserve. This is a delicate Judean desert ecosystem that was placed under the Palestinian Authority's jurisdiction for protection and preservation under the clear and unequivocal stipulation that this nature reserve would be a zero construction zone. When the Y Accords were signed, there were some 268 structures in the nature reserve, and those were certainly permitted to stay there. What we found by the time 2024 rolled around was that there were over nearly 3,500 structures there, massive illegal structures. And we have been reporting, documenting, monitoring, complaining, going to court, going to the Knesset about this problem for many years. As you can see on your screen, this was our first full report on the goings on in the Y Nature Reserve back in 2017. We have had lots of press coverage. I have personally taken international reporters from international media out into the reserve, and we have been pounding away at this issue for years. The problem has always been that the state of Israel did not know what to do about the violations of the Palestinian Authority going on in this nature reserve. This was an international, potentially an international incident going on here. The European Union and the United States of America, your tax dollars, all of you, were going to the Palestinian Authority and supporting the massive destruction of the environment, and the massive violation of international law. But Israel technically had no jurisdiction in this area. Several months ago, the Israeli cabinet finally, after our constant hounding, after Knesset hearings in all of the relevant Knesset committees, after taking dozens of members of Knesset, ministers, and other decision makers out into the nature reserve and showing them what was going on there with their own eyes, the cabinet finally issued a policy directive stating that it would be taking back for the state of Israel enforcement responsibility to protect the nature reserve. So we had the advantage in this case of the environmental issue being a binding issue. Israel is a signatory to international conventions that require the state to protect the environment. So in the case that the Palestinian Authority was destroying the environment, they would automatically lose their overriding legal claims to be the sovereign, and the state of Israel was required to go in and save the environment. And that is precisely what the government decided to do. Today, for the first time ever, the state of Israel enforced the law in an area that was under Palestinian Authority jurisdiction under the Oslo Accords. Today, I will show you some footage, I hope. Let's see if it'll work. Yes. See, this took a very quick drone picture because we weren't really allowed to take pictures today while the civil administration was acting there. But there were seven massive villas, structures that were destroyed, demolished today by the civil administration in the Y Reserve. And the state of Israel has committed to continuing the law enforcement sweep that it began today. We, as I hope you noticed in the previous slide, we presented the government with all of our data, all of our aerial photos, all of our maps, all of our documentation for what was going on there. The government itself, the Ministry of Settlement and National projects, or national missions, I believe it's called in English, created this report based on our recommendations and our findings, conducted research of its own. And that was the basis for the policy decision, which resulted in today's changes on the ground. So what I tried to emphasize here with all these funny arrows is that we begin by collecting data, analyzing it, mapping it out, bringing it to the attention of our legislators and of the world, and in this case, the international community as well. We went to the Knesset and we worked with parliamentarians. We convened numerous hearings on this issue and demanded that the state formulate a policy to address this very interesting interplay of international law and environmental concern and jurisdiction. And eventually, what resulted was policy reform, and today enforcement, which we hope will be just the beginning of the state of Israel taking back responsibility for many of the areas that it has allowed to slip through its fingers. So again, that was hot news from today, from the Judean desert, but it is part of a larger picture, which we are about to publish. I'm actually putting the finishing touches on the translation of the full report. This is the third in the series of our War of Attrition updates. We began in 2019, 1 decade exactly after the publication of the Fayad Plan by the Palestinian Authority, in which it declared that it would no longer honor the Oslo Accords and that it would build a Palestinian state simply by creating facts on the ground, building aggressively in Area C, the area under Israeli jurisdiction. And we have been tracking the progress that the Palestinian Authority has made in the face of complete inaction on the part of the Israeli government to face this challenge since 2009. So in 2019, we published the first in the series of the War of Attrition reports and documented all of the illegal construction and the systematic nature of Palestinian annexation attempts in Judea and Samaria. In 2022, we issued an updated report, and the data was appalling, absolutely appalling. The state of Israel had completely lost control of the territory. This month, we have finally completed a new survey of all structures in Judea and Samaria. We map out every single structure in the territory and see who's building what, where, how much, how often, and why. And so the findings will be published very, very shortly. But here's a quick look, I hope. Yes, at what our findings have been. Under the current government, for the first time since 2009, actually for the first time since the signing of the Oslo Accords, there has been a drastic drop in the rate of illegal Arab construction in Judea and Samaria's Area C, the area under Israeli jurisdiction. There are several factors that may have contributed to this, but it is clear that the government's policy decisions that began to be implemented several weeks after the present government was seated have had a deterrent effect. New illegal construction is at a low that it has not seen in decades. We still have a problem. There are still over 92,500 illegal Arab structures in Area C, but the rate of construction has been slashed dramatically, as you can see. Also, just to point out, this is only the new construction. Whereas in previous periods, this being the height of the illegal construction splurge that was going on under the Bennett-Lapid government and the Gantz government. This is since the Netanyahu government, the current Netanyahu government took office, this has been the result. And this is the result of our constant explanations to policymakers about what the strategic impact of this seemingly innocent civilian construction really is. We believe that, very unfortunately, what we've been saying for almost 19 years became very, very clear and easily understood in the aftermath of October 7th. The invasion along the Gaza border was facilitated by seemingly innocent, illegal structures all along the border with Gaza. These structures were used as the base for launching murderous attacks, for kidnappings, for constant rocket launching, and for many, many other things, for holding prisoners and then enabling them to be smuggled out of the territory through underground tunnels, various other things. All of these illegal structures that the government of Israel simply ignored along the border for a very long time suddenly began to take on a very sinister cast. And the government of Israel began to understand, particularly after we published, right after the outbreak of the war, our study on the seamline buffer zone, which we've discussed in earlier webinars, and you're welcome to see the full report on our website. But we began to illustrate very clearly to the government of Israel exactly what the threat to every single man, woman, and child in the state of Israel on both sides of the Green Line is when you look at these illegal construction patterns that we had been showing. What you see here on your screen is a map that was not created by us. This is a map that was created by the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. OCHA is an extreme anti-Israel arm of the United Nations. And they have published this map showing where the demolitions in recent months have taken place. And if you note where the demolitions are, you will see we didn't even have to go and ask the civil administration where the demolitions in recent weeks and months have been carried out. OCHA did it for us, and the extreme leftist organizations that provide them information, such as B'Tselem, Bimkom, Breaking the Silence, and others. And you can see from the placement of these demolitions that the State of Israel has finally figured out exactly what kind of security threat these quote unquote innocent illegal structures pose. So this is precisely where the State of Israel has been enforcing the law for the first time this year. And when the State of Israel began enforcing the law, this was the result. The deterrent effect is clear. It's not that the State of Israel has demolished thousands of structures. They have not demolished thousands of structures. They have demolished key, strategic, massive structures that have sent a message to the Palestinian Authority that this will no longer be tolerated. And that has made all the difference. So the facts on the ground are once again changed because of the policy decision, which was the result of public and media pressure, which was the result of Regavim's constant publication of our findings and analysis. So yes, we do take credit for this massive sea change, and we hope that it will continue. Another thing that we'd like to look back on over the past year is what's happened in the Negev. The Negev is one more area in which Regavim has been operating since the day it was founded, close to 19 years ago. The Negev is another place where I like to give the example of what Regavim does. And I tell people very often that I figured out after about 3 months on the job that the people at Regavim believe that they're going to empty the ocean with a paper cup. They're going to they're going to push back against tens of thousands of illegal structures all through the territory, all through the State of Israel, sovereign Israel, and in Judea and Samaria. They believe they're going to push back against and undo all of the strategic damage and the environmental damage and the damage to our sovereignty that has been allowed to occur over decades of non-enforcement. They're going to stand at the edge of this ocean and empty it with a paper cup. In the past year, we've done two things, essentially, following that analogy. We've made the cup bigger and we've made the ocean smaller. And the Negev is one place where we really can see that the tide is changing. We created, after many years of studying the Negev and its extremely unique and problematic tangle of problems, we created a plan for approaching the challenges of the Negev. We called it the Staple Care Initiative. We presented it to members of the previous government, and we have been working for years to try to promote this large-scale vision for the future of the Negev, how to solve the problems today, and what the Negev should look like by the time we hit 2050. The Staple Care Initiative was presented to some people several years ago who at the time were probably names you've never heard of. And today, one of them is the minister in charge of the Bedouin Authority. His name is Minister Amichai Shikli. Before he was elected, before the current round of elections, he sat down with Regavim, came out to the Negev with us, learned the issues for over a year. And when this government was sworn in, he was the only person willing to take on this massive challenge. He took our Stable Care Initiative and adopted over 85% of the initiative and incorporated it in the government's new 5-year plan for the Negev. Our Stable Care Initiative included not only an analysis of the problems, but a very clear blueprint of how to solve them, precisely how to resettle, regulate, and promote progress for the Bedouin inhabitants of the Negev, structural changes, legislative changes, enforcement changes, all things that approach the very, very, as I said, tangled web of problems, both social, political, historical problems of the Negev. So 85% of the government's 5-year plan was dictated by Regavim's stable care, was adopted from Regavim's stable care initiative. These are just a few of the highlights of the program. Anyone who's interested in reading it in depth, it's also on our website. You're welcome to have a look and see exactly what our recommendations are. Or to read our book, Beduistan, which lays out all of the problems and suggests the way forward. Another issue where, well, let me go back and just say why I brought this here, because we have seen in the past several weeks a huge outcry from the anti-Israel community about unprecedented enforcement in the Negev. For the first time, there have been prosecutions against polygamy. For the first time, there have been prosecutions for defrauding of the national health system and the national social welfare system by polygamous families. For the first time, the state of Israel has refused to offer more and more and more incentives for people to stop breaking the law. For the first time, the state of Israel has decisively carried out enforcement against illegal squatters camps that were holding up development of whole new communities, of major traffic highways and trains, squatters camps that were strategically placed after the announcement of plans for development of new communities. And the government of Israel, for the first time ever, has drawn a line in the sand, literally, and said, this will no longer be permitted. We have made offers for resettlement, massive incentive project packages for relocation, and anyone who does not obey the law and take advantage of the generous offers will be left with nothing. In recent weeks, there have been 5, possibly 6 whole squatters camps that were simply relocated into the legal communities that had been prepared for them. For the first time in decades, the state of Israel is making progress in the Negev. And we are very, very proud of the fact that the method by which this progress is being made was created by us and was adopted by the government. So the next area in which we have seen a lot of progress, but we've been working on for many, many years, is the fight against UNRWA. We have had, since the outbreak of the war in particular, some very successful but unfortunately reactive campaigns. We have been proactive about the problems with UNRWA for very many years. We have petitioned the government to act against the malign impact of UNRWA and to take a stand against the anomaly of inherited refugeeism that is fueling the Israel-Palestinian conflict and has been for many generations. But in addition to all of that, very specific things having to do with the active participation of UNRWA employees, theoretically educators, school principals, doctors, all sorts of UNRWA staff in acts of terrorism, massacres, and worse on October 7th and thereafter. Some UNRWA employees have been found to have be still actively holding hostages. Some of them were involved in unspeakable acts, and UNRWA has been largely discredited. It's not just us saying this. There was actually an article in the New York Times this past week about 26 UNRWA employees who have been found to be active terrorists. We know of many more of them, and they are not unique. So one of the things that we did was what you see down here at the bottom of the screen was to convene Knesset hearings on UNRWA, which eventually led to what you see here on the bottom left, a vote in the Knesset. 92 in favor, 10 opposed. Those 10, by the way, were members of the Arab parties. Not a big surprise there. But the Knesset overwhelmingly upheld a bill and passed a bill to boot UNRWA out of Israel. And that has actually happened. UNRWA has removed itself from Jerusalem after years in which we have been trying to get that done together with other partners, particularly David Bedin and the Middle East research project that he has been running for years about the incitement in UNRWA curricula and the other impacts of UNRWA. So all of these things were borne out. We actually had a very interesting campaign a few months ago when UNRWA itself was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. We felt that was one of the most disgusting affronts to morality and to truth that had floated up from the sewers in recent months. And we launched a campaign. At the time, we recommended that if UNRWA was eligible, perhaps Boko Haram, perhaps Yahya Sinwar, perhaps Al-Qaeda, all sorts of other notorious terrorist organizations and individuals were as equally as worthy. And we were happy to hear that not only was UNRWA not awarded a Nobel Peace Prize, but that Sinwar will no longer ever be eligible for a Nobel Peace Prize because you can't give peace prizes to people who are dead. And there's no reason for me to elaborate on that bit of good news. So UNRWA and the massive impact of discrediting this horrific organization that has created millions of refugees out of thin air and continues to be a major lever of pressure against the state of Israel is a massive step forward. And we hope that it will be built upon in coming months. One more thing that I wanted to touch upon this evening is just to give you a brief taste of some of the important new projects that we have launched this past year, despite the war, despite all of our staffing challenges and our funding challenges and our seriously frayed attention span because of everything that's going on around us, we have actually launched several new important branches that are already having an impact on the ground. One of them is our Jerusalem division, which is already having a tremendous impact in terms of forcing the government of Israel to reassert its sovereignty over our capital city. It's a very, very peculiar situation that we face with thousands, literally thousands of illegal structures inside municipal Jerusalem, with whole Arab neighborhoods that have become no-go zones and are slipping and sliding down into Area C and connecting areas of Palestinian Authority control inside Jerusalem. These are all extremely problematic issues that no one has addressed, and Regavim has already begun to have an impact in these issues. Another important project that has been percolating in the background for quite some time, but is now fully operational, is our Green Now project. This is the Hebrew logo for Yarok Achshav, which means green now. It's essentially peace now, but not. It is an environmental watchdog that tries to examine what happens to the environment when there are seams of jurisdiction that are unenforceable. As you probably have figured out, the environment, nature, and things like water pollution, air pollution, soil pollution, and misuse of natural resources don't respect the green line, and they don't respect political boundaries in general. So we have massive problems where the Palestinian Authority is although it is responsible for things like waste removal and for water treatment and for developing new water sources and for maintaining the environment, has done absolutely the opposite in all cases. And the Palestinian Authority is actually a massive polluter and is a massive cause of health crises for both Jews and Arabs alike, all along the areas that are seam lines between Palestinian Authority jurisdiction and Israeli jurisdiction. And Green Now has just completed a multi-year complete survey of environmental hazards throughout Judea and Samaria, and will be presenting this massive survey to the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Ministry of Interior next week. Actually, on the 25th of December, we will have a launch event out in the field. We've already begun formulating policy, and Green Now has already had some major environmental successes in preventing highly polluting waste incineration plants and dumping of untreated toxic waste in various areas all over Judea and Samaria. We're working on massive national level projects to address these environmental issues. So Green Now, you'll be hearing a lot more about Green Now, I assume, in the coming months. Another interesting project that we have been talking about for years and finally got off the ground this year is this. It's called Eretz, which is a regional planning council monitor. It appears that the decisions having to do with land use policy inside Israel are stacked against us from the very start, because the planning commissions, the method through which the regulations flow and the decisions are made for municipal boundaries, for all sorts of approvals of plans to expand existing or new communities, all of these things are made by committees that are appointed in apparently very, very peculiar ways, through back rooms. One friend brings another, one hand washes the other, and nobody's really overseeing what's going on there. That has resulted in massive losses for, particularly in the Galilee, of Jewish communities losing land reserves and being denied the ability to grow and to expand and to receive government subsidies, while the Arab communities in the same areas have grown exponentially and receive massive government subsidies and tax breaks. So we began to collect a community of professionals, of engineers, of city planners, of legislators in all of these areas, specialists in municipal and regional regulatory issues, lawyers as well, and to have them simply attend these hearings of regional plan, receive the copies of motions to the regional councils, learn them, study them, understand their significance and their ramifications, and when necessary to lodge objections, to follow the process through to make sure that it is done properly. We've already had a massive success in blocking the legalization of the largest illegal commercial zone in Israel. We have for years been watching the growth, the sprawl essentially of the Kfar Qassam, an illegal commercial center at Kfar Qassam, which has posed not only environmental and safety threats to the entire area, but is a massive black hole of under the table money. No taxes are paid, no registration, all sorts of things are happening there because it is an illegal commercial center. And we have followed the attempts by the Kfar Qassam municipality to essentially get the state of Israel to legalize all of this illegal activity there and give it a rubber stamp of approval and this is just the first in many of the projects on Eretz, on our regional planning monitors agenda. The last new project is we launched in Hebrew a podcast series called Feet on the Ground. As you can see, this is the emblem. We've collected, there are already 6 episodes up in the on air. If anyone here is fluent enough in Hebrew, they tackle the basic issues and bring in a community of experts. Sometimes it's legal issues, sometimes it's historic issues, sometimes it's land use issues, regulatory issues, international issues, all of these things in a podcast format that is incredibly informative and is taking off now and is doing very, very well. So you can recommend that to your Hebrew-speaking friends. So all of these things are, I hope that you will hear much more about them as the new year is launched. But we have also right now about to be published all of these important new studies. As I mentioned earlier, the War of Attrition 2024, the analysis of all of the data that we have collected on illegal construction since our last study in 2022. We have a second edition of our, an expanded edition in Hebrew and a first edition in English of a massive legal, essentially a textbook of articles by internationally recognized lawyers and professors in international law, having to do with property law and international law as it pertains to Judea and Samaria, essentially what Israel's rights are there and what international law does or does not say about Israel, Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, and who the land belongs to. So we're hopefully going to be launching that book in about 6 months' time. Green Now, as I said, the whole environmental status report has been translated. I am putting the finishing touches on that now, and hopefully within the next month, you will be able to read that massive multi-year study of environmental hazards in Judea and Samaria in English. Another update that will be coming out is our study of judicial bias called Measure for Measure. It's a fascinating study that we update every several years. It was the impetus for the entire conversation about judicial reform. Another important report that will be coming out is our, finally, our report on settler violence, unpacking the narrative of settler violence. We have been diving, and the more we dive into this cesspool of fake news and lies, the worse it seems. But we will be publishing the settler violence study within the next, I hope, 2 to 3 weeks. Policy papers that are already on the Knesset's table but have not been published publicly yet, but you can expect to see soon, is an update and recommendations regarding the battle against polygamy, where we have made significant progress. Our policy paper on Al-Khiran, which is one of the places that was recently demolished in the Negev, and international press has jumped on this and is portraying it as a case of dispossession and racial discrimination, and it is anything but that. Nachal Cheletz, also a position paper that will probably be available on our website within the next several days. An important case that shows just how the battle for the outskirts of Jerusalem is being waged. So all of these things are things you can look forward to in the coming weeks. You've got your homework. And with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. What you see on your screen now is a scanner code. Any of you who have a smartphone can scan that code, and it will take you to our website where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for our WhatsApp update groups, WhatsApp, Telegram. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. You can do all of those things simply by scanning this code, and it'll take you to the homepage of our website. So I thank you all for your attention, and now I'm going to try to address some of the questions. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a moment. Stop share. Okay, so you should see me at this point, I assume. Okay. So there were questions that were submitted in advance, and I'm also looking at the chat here. Let's see. Does that null and void the Y accord? So that's a very good question. The wording of the government's decision regarding the Y Accords designated nature reserve was very, very specific and very particular. It did not annul the Y Accords. It did not say anything about the larger picture of the Oslo Accords. What it said was that it was taking responsibility for enforcement, not taking sovereignty, jurisdiction, or anything else, but enforcement responsibility. So it's a small step. It's a massive step because it's the first step. And it's the first time that Israel has ever actually taken any step outside of the letter of the Oslo framework. The fact that the Palestinian Authority announced in 2009 that that framework was no longer valid or binding did not stop Israel from holding itself to that framework, simply because there is no other framework at the moment. And that is the way international law works. Unless you have something else to take its place, that law is still in effect, and the Palestinian Authority is in violation. I would also just point out what you probably all know, and that is that if you read the Oslo Accords, read every word of every page of all of those agreements, what you will see is that the state of Israel and the Palestinian Authority did not agree on any terms or any sanctions having to do with violations. So the agreements don't say that there's no exit clause. There's no stipulation that something would be considered a substantive violation and would therefore nullify the accords. They're simply open-ended. So that was what kept the state of Israel for so long from doing anything in the Y reserve, because it was unclear under international law what the options were, what the responsibility was, what the liabilities were. And at this point, because we are already being accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity, we didn't have very much to lose. So the state of Israel has moved forward, thankfully, better late than never. Now, the question that I was asked here, UNRWA continues in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza? Absolutely not. The law that was passed in the Knesset not only forbids UNRWA's presence in Israel and any areas under Israeli jurisdiction, it also prohibits any Israelis from having contact with UNRWA, which means members of Knesset, members of government, members of the military are forbidden by Israeli law from having any contact with UNRWA. So that's big. No one actually knows. There are still things that need to be ironed out, but that will probably happen because we're going to bring particular lawsuits that will force the government to clarify exactly what UNRWA's or the and the UN in general, what their immunity is. So we're going to attack that aggressively to clarify that. Where is Kfar Qassam? Kfar Qassam is right in the center of Israel. Kfar Qassam is on the junction of Route 5 and Route 6. And it's insane. Right across the road from this massive, sprawling and growing illegal commercial center, there is a legal commercial center that where people who have businesses and in the legal one pay taxes and have sewage and have proper electricity and pay their bills. And right across the road, all these businesses who do none of those things. So we are working very hard on making sure that that does not get whitewashed and legalized post facto. Link to podcast. Yes, I will send that out. I'll have to get it for you. These folks at Regavim do great work. Yes, we do. Unsung heroes protecting the land. Yes, we are. Thank you very much. Is the Israeli public aware of the incredible situation Regavim tackles? It should be. That's part of my job. So the more people you tell, the better I'm doing my job. QR code not working, not good. Okay, so if the QR code is not working, I would say simply go navigate to rigavim.org and you will get to the homepage of our website and everything is accessible from there. What is Rigavim's official position regarding the establishment of a Palestinian state? Okay, this is the topic for a full webinar, but what I will say is that Rigavim opposes any foreign or other sovereignty in the land of Israel. I would point out to all of you, we are all, everyone on this webinar and anyone hearing this webinar is a grown adult. Please don't allow this issue to be infantilized. And what I mean by that is we have been told for so many years that some people believe it already, that there's only two options. It's either two states or war. It's either two states or apartheid. It's either two states or it's one state and the state of Israel will cease to be a Jewish state. All of these things are more or less schoolyard sorts of ultimatums. And they are not a realistic political, they're not a nuanced, adult, grown-up political approach to real-life issues. Issues of this type are solved everywhere in the world through political arrangements. There's only one thing that you need to solve it, and that is for both sides, not just one side, for both sides to negotiate in good faith and to be interested in living peacefully. When that happens, the solution is not going to be another failed Arab state in the heart of the state of Israel that would threaten the existence of every Jewish man, woman, and child here and would destabilize the Middle East. No one really actually wants that. And to tell you the truth, I don't think the Palestinians themselves do, because if they did, they would have had a state a long time ago. But again, this is an issue for another full-length webinar. We can schedule that for next year and talk about different possible resolutions to the Arab-Israel conflict. The first thing I will tell you is the moment you get rid of UNRWA and you apply the same method of the same approach toward Palestinian refugees as you do to every other refugee population in the world, you will have solved 90% of the problem right off the bat, before you even start. So we're going to leave that one for now. Canada and others voted in support of UNRWA. Yes, indeed. And you voted for those governments. Think about that, folks. Think hard. How does a new framework get written and by whom? A new framework for Saudi Arabia, Har HaBayit, Kotel. These are all things that are beyond the scope of this evening's discussion. What we don't know about Saudi Arabia, what we do know about Saudi Arabia, those are not things that I am any more qualified than any of you to discuss, so I'm not going to. But there are many things happening. Today, a German reporter called me for a comment. This happens all the time. And he said, what can you say about the elections in the United States and the impact of the Trump administration's being elected? And I said, there are two things I want to tell you. One is I'm not a prophet. And two, Donald Trump is not a messiah. The issues that we have are our issues. And once we decide how we want to treat those issues and how we want those issues to play out and what we want the final results to be, we will have solved most of our problem. The only thing that I can tell you about Donald Trump and about the elections in the United States and hopefully the elections in Canada and the elections in France and the elections anywhere else outside of the state of Israel is the only thing that we expect is for the change in the American government to allow us to speak as an independent sovereign nation and to be heard. That is certainly not what the situation was under the Biden administration. And we are looking forward to working as equals with our closest ally. But that is certainly not the situation with the outgoing administration, and it has not been the situation with far too many countries and organizations that consider themselves or claim to be our allies. Allies do not dictate. Allies do not, unless you are a real dyed-in-the-wool colonialist, the situation, the treatment that the state of Israel has been given by the Biden administration and before that by the Obama administration are extremely, extremely problematic in terms of allied democracies. And the state of Israel now has an opportunity to stand up for itself, to assert its place among the nations as an independent, sovereign Jewish state. We hope that that will happen. So we are out of time. I would be happy to answer any further questions by email or to schedule further webinars on topics that are interesting to you or that you've raised this evening. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm very easy to find. You can email me at naomi@regavim.org or respond to the Friends of Regavim emails that you receive. I hope that you will invite friends, relatives, family members to join us and to follow us and to consume and internalize our content, because that is, as you've seen this evening, the beginning of real change on the ground. Thank you all. Have a good evening.